All right. Okay. What's up? Today we're not gonna go through the update. I'm gonna do a freaking rant. I'm on one, and I honestly have no choice because I was gonna do a normal update, but I finished reading the Gospels today. I finished the Gospel of John, and I had some other stuff I was gonna talk about, but obviously that all that stuff was just kind of percolating all morning, and I got on a perplexity rabbit hole about salvation basically, and like um Jesus said to the disciples in John after he's resurrected, um you whoever you forgive will be forgiven, whoever you don't forgive will not be forgiven, right? He says that to him. So I'm like, how does that jive with the idea of salvation, and like how does that make any sense? So I that started the perplexity rabbit hole. And I'm not gonna lie, so I went on a bender of this perplexity rabbit hole for probably an hour, just freaking, just like, what the fuck. And I genuinely was really frustrated and angry. And you know, I don't really get that. I get frustrated sometimes. I don't get that angry. I don't feel like the anger that I felt today very often. And it was just like pretty. I'm just freaking on one right now. So I'm like, this is the time I do my updates, and I couldn't do a regular update and just freaking um pretend like I wasn't freaking on one about this shit. So I'm just gonna rant about this, and it's a two-part thing. It's kind of mainly about salvation, right? This idea of salvation, because I'm thinking about the resurrection, and I was going through the Gospels and looking at all the contradictions too. Like, there's these, man, the contradictions are just so alarming to me, and which is what also contributed to me being pissed, because I grew up in this church and being told the Bible is the perfect, infallible word of God, and it's the perfect word of God, and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, dude, you literally just have to read it and you will see that that's not true. And whether Jesus is real and rose from the dead or all that stuff, like, that's a separate question. But the idea that these gospel accounts, these resurrection accounts, they cannot be true. Like in Luke, it says Jesus ascended the day of the resurrection, right back to heaven. But then in Acts, it says he freaking was around for 40 days, and like all these accounts of when he showed up and how long he was there and where he went, and did he go to Galilee or did he not? Who was at the tomb? Was there one angel at the tomb? Was he in the tomb? Was there two angels? Like, all these accounts. Who got there first? Who did Jesus appear to first? All these freaking accounts are, not all, but there's many contradictory ones that cannot be reconciled. Granted, there are a lot that you can explain it away and say, well, it said at dawn, and well, it was dark, but it could have been dawn right when she was on her way and when she got there. You can explain shit away, some of them, but some of them you just can't. Was it two angels in there, or one outside, or two outside, or what? So, um, same thing with the rooster crowing. I come across that as I'm reading, and it's like in one gospel, Jesus' words in red letters: "You'll deny me 3 times before the rooster crows." And then in Mark, it's like, "Oh, you'll deny me 3 times before the rooster crows twice." And in the account, he denies Jesus once, and then the rooster crows before he denies him 3 times. And while that's um, you know, not like necessarily a meaningful difference, Jesus's words that are recorded are different, right? Here he says this thing, here he says this thing. They're not the same thing. And so that just leads me to go, anyways, it's not perfect. It's clearly flawed. Whether the main kernel of it is true or not, whatever. That's a different question. Anyways, so that's kind of pissing me off. I'm like, dude, I just feel like freaking lied to my whole childhood, like, it's just weird. But then I get into this thing about salvation. Jesus says, "Are you forgiven?" He tells the disciples, if you forgive people, they're forgiven. If you don't, they're not. So I'm getting into this. And I'm asking perplexity, like, okay, based on all the gospels and Jesus' words, what do you have to do to be saved? What is salvation? And this is also very frustrating and problematic, is that this is a contentious issue, right? People don't agree on this. Some people think you literally have to be baptized. Some people think you just have to believe in God and put your faith in him, that he died for your sins, and accept it, etc. There's different ones. But for all intents and purposes, we'll go with the kind of mainstream idea, which is you have to believe that he died on the cross and rose again, and put your faith in him and your trust in him, basically. So then that leads me to go, okay, what does that mean to put your faith in him, right? To put your trust in him, to believe in him. Is belief and faith the same thing? What does that actually mean? Like, and in a, as a matter of like psychologically, like scientifically, what does it mean? Like, could you measure if someone believes in God or put their faith in God, right? Is that a thing you could do? How do you know if you have your faith in God? The thing about that that's really difficult, which I'll get into those meanings, but it's like if you put your faith in God one time, but then you lose your faith, does that still count? How long does the faith have to be? How strong does the faith have to be, right? Faith isn't just a switch, yes or no. It's like a freaking gradient that's flexible and flowing. And so when and so it's like, dude, it's so freaking unclear. It's just so annoying. And which is, I'm like, bro, whoever's responsible for the gospels, like whether you think it's God or the Holy Spirit or whoever, I just am like, dude, I feel like they freaking botched it so hard. It was like, here's your chance. You had one job. Just make it clear. Just freaking make it clear. And it is not. And that's so annoying to me because it just, it undermines the whole project. If like Jesus came and like wants us all to be saved and go to heaven, and it's like this idea, it's like, dude, freaking the best you could do, it like you could have just been like, put that shit in the sky on a that stays there forever, clear as day with definitions, and like freaking make it clear. It's like come on. But anyway, so that's freaking annoying too. But anyways, back to faith and belief. What I kind of came to learn about it so far, and granted, I have to caveat, I'm freaking on one because I just finished this stuff. Inevitably, my mind is going to change. I'm going to learn new stuff and find new perspectives. But I want to capture now literally what I'm feeling and thinking in my like initial impressions, like coming off of this, like coming in hot right off this. Just genuinely what it is for me. So anyways, belief and faith are different. And belief, as far as I can tell, is more of a concrete thing. Like this is a water bottle with water in it, right? That's like a concrete thing you can measure. I have a belief that there's water in here. The example that was used on Perplexity was there's a tiger in the room, right? Like if there's no tiger in the room, it's something that is essentially it's something that is not a choice, right? It's like based on your perception, and if you're in a room and there's no tiger, you can't just believe that there's a tiger in the room, right? It is based in evidence and your sensory perception and all these things. Now faith, on the other hand, is almost like it follows from belief, right? Where it's putting your trust and action behind a belief. That's one way to conceptualize it, but the problem is that you can have faith without belief, right? So you can say, oh, for example, if I say let's say this was empty, right? I could say, oh, I'm gonna try to drink it, right? As if there was water in there, even though there's not water in there, right? And that would be putting my action behind something that I don't believe. So that's where it gets kind of confusing, because it's like, okay, what if you have to have faith in Jesus, right? Or his resurrection, or his, the sacrifice. It's like, do you have to believe in it to put your faith in it? You kind of do. And and for me, these concepts get so weird, because it's like, how would you know? Like, how do you know what that means? And like, it's so weird because I've conceptualized it before. Like, imagine jumping off a cliff, right? Because, okay, so you could say that if your belief doesn't last, right? Because for me, like one time I had faith, like I know the experience of being like, this is true, Jesus is real, this is true, believe it in my heart, right? Like that's how I felt. That would be my report of it. But then obviously I like kind of eventually got out of there. But the question is, was that real faith, right? Because you could make the argument, true faith, if you have true faith and belief, it is everlasting, right? It's going to stay. And if it doesn't stay, then that wasn't actually true faith, right? And a lot of people make this argument when they're talking about salvation. I kind of think of it like jumping off a cliff, where it's like, oh, if you say you're going to jump off the cliff, but you don't do it, then did you mean it when you said you were going to do it, right? It's like kind of like that. But it's weird because at the end of the day, this thing, faith, that is required for salvation, right? To not go to hell if you want to go to heaven. it's essentially an amorphous, moving psychological state, right? If you look at it scientifically, like what is faith and what is belief and where do they come from and are they a choice, right? That's what I'm getting at when I'm looking at this. I'm like, there's not really evidence that these things are a choice you make, right? That it is something that happens to you. And you can put yourself in circumstances that make that happening to you more likely. But at some point, for faith and belief to be present, it's a cognitive process that just has to happen to you, right? You can't force it, right? It's like if you were in a room without a tiger, no matter how much you frickin' meditate or you try to convince yourself there's a tiger or you whatever you do, right? There you're not, if you scan the brain and be like, is there a belief that there's a tiger in the room with this person? They're just not gonna believe it. And I think if you're a religious person, you can just imagine Mormonism, Islam, whatever, if you're Christian, what it would be like to try to believe that, right? If it was like your life depended on it, gun to your head, you have to believe this is true. You can't do it, right? It has to happen to you to a certain degree. And so, interestingly, with faith, it's like this. It's a mix of like empirical evidence, your experience, culture, emotion. Right? There's an emotional component in the way all these things interact, come together to manifest what we would call faith, right? And most likely the faith that they're talking about in the Old Testament or in the New Testament in the Gospels. And the problem with those things is that culture moves, emotion moves, empirical evidence moves. All these things are moving. And so if them coming together in a certain way produces faith, that's not going to be lasting in a lot of cases, right? It's going to waver. And a lot of Christians talk about that their faith wavers and they have doubts and they have different things. But it's like, well, dude, if you have doubts, is it real faith, right? Because like, imagine you're a Christian and you have faith and you're like, this is fully true. And then you lose your faith for a little bit and you think it's not true. And then you come back, oh, it's true again. Like if you were to die in that period of time where you didn't think it was true, would you go to heaven if you were to die in that period of time before or after? Like what is the window? And so on one hand, that's really frustrating that it's this idea of salvation is, as far as you can tell, as far as I can tell, not a choice. It's not something you choose to do, right? You could choose to have faith in that you could act as if God was real or Jesus was real and died for you and act in that way. But if you don't really believe it, are you going to go to heaven? I don't think so, right? And I think if you just believe it, but you don't act in that way, you also aren't going to go to heaven. I remember in growing up in church, people would say all the time, the devil believes in God. Like the devil believes in Jesus. Like it doesn't matter if you believe, it's that you have to put your faith in him, accept his gift and all this. And so this idea of like, what does that freaking mean? I'm on Perplexity for like an hour this morning, just like furiously asking it all these psychological questions and what's the difference of belief and faith and da-da-da. And it's just so circular and like, it just is whack. I'm like, dude, it's like, that's why I think I have this overwhelming feeling as I've been reading the Bible and reading the Gospels and like deeply contemplating this stuff a lot, watching a lot of debates. I genuinely think this like modern conception of Jesus, salvation, God, heaven, hell, this whole idea, I think it's whack. I think it's freaking wrong. Like, I don't think the whole thing is a nothing burger. Like, I think there's something there, but I feel like it's twisted, it's misunderstood, it's not the vibe. And one thing that's interesting, right, to me is that as I'm learning about faith and what it is and how you, like, from a scientific perspective and a psychological, like, perspective, what is faith? How does it work? How do you get it? What happens, etc. This thing about how it's a cultural influence, it's an emotional influence, and it's an experiential thing. And there's other factors, but those are kind of the main factors that are interacting to create faith and belief, right? And why? Because Perplexity kept saying, like, with the tiger in the room example, there's just no way to get yourself to believe there's a tiger in the room, really, right? But with faith, you can cultivate it over years of practice, culture, doing certain things, being part of certain communities, opening your mind to certain possibilities. And over time, you can cultivate a faith, and that might result in belief, ultimately, to a certain degree. And I think this is why when you look at the modern church, and especially when I look at stuff like Orthodox Christianity or Catholicism or some of these more like ritualistic versions of Christianity, it makes sense why with Jesus, like, there's none of that stuff, right? It's like all that stuff got built, like all these churches and steeples and freaking incense and like all this shit they do got basically invented. All these weird freaking outfits and shit they do, right? Invented later. And it makes sense that they do that because like all the songs, all the shit they do, right? Because those influence these things that influence faith, which is community and culture, emotional experience, like singing worship and having these amazing murals and having these smells and these different things and all this, and experientially too, right? You're gonna have crazier psychological experiences when you're in these crazy cathedrals and have this amazing music, having this music and having all these things, and it makes sense why a lot of these religions kind of, if you look at the ministry of Jesus, right? That's not what Catholicism looks like. If you look at the life of Jesus and what the disciples were doing and the shit they were doing, right? That's not what it looks like. It looks like this weird freaking, like, I don't know. I just wonder if Jesus like waltzed into the churches these days, he'd be like, bruh, what the hell, right? And partially because, and here's another thing about belief. I know I'm all over the place. I don't really care. I'm just freestyling it. But if you look at Jesus's life, what he said, what he taught, you can make the argument that like 95% of Christians or more don't do it. They don't do what he said. They don't live like he said to live, right? They kind of do a church thing and they kind of say they believe and maybe they pray, but it's like Jesus, you could, in my opinion, you can make an argument that Jesus called his followers and Christians, right, to like this radical life of selflessness, of like lack of possessions, of like of doing what he did, living like he lived, right? And like the disciples did, like he called the disciples. And people, some people do it, some really don't do it. And it's just weird. I don't know. I don't know what I expected when I honestly do. I was expecting to read the Gospels and like not necessarily have a come to Jesus moment, but be like, oh, like, similar. Like, I honestly had a better experience reading the Old Testament, but it's like, I get to the end of this and I just go, dude, I'm just like disappointed, confused, genuinely angry, and just, I feel like a weirdly isolated because it's like, I don't understand how people read this and like don't go, what the heck, right? And like the questions that come up for me that are like relatively unanswerable, I'm like, how did I go my entire life in church and around this stuff and like no one is asking these questions or like acknowledging that this doesn't make a lot of sense and is hard to understand, and like this thing about salvation, how wishy-washy and unclear it is, and like it just, I don't know, dude. I just go, it's it's so weird and sketchy, and it's just weird how pissed off it makes me because it's like it just if you look at it from a here's the thing. I'm watching the Jordan Peterson gospel series, and if you look at it from like a psychological freaking perspective and like a metaphorical perspective and you don't take it literally, I'm like on board, right? It's like, oh, it makes so much sense. It makes more sense. It's like better. It like is more useful, makes more sense. Everything's coherent. But when you look at it through this lens of like how I grew up in a modern church and like a literal interpretation of this and like actual heaven and hell and like this actual thing, an actual resurrection, an actual, just like if you just take it at text face value, it's just whack, dude. I just don't think that's what it is. Like, I don't know. And I just fail to like, cause like on one side of the coin, I think maybe I'm just retarded, right? Cause it's like, I could just be retarded and like, and mentally incapable of like grasping these concepts. But if I'm not, if I'm just maybe average intelligence, how are these other people around me and that I know and that I see online doing these debates and doing these things that believe it. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, right? It's just like, dude, I don't know. Because I always have this analogy of Christian or of electricity with religion and Christianity, where it's like, if it were like really true, like just undeniably true, it would be like electricity, where it's just plugged in everywhere. Everyone uses it. It's not controversial. It just works. You can measure it. You can freaking, it's a thing, right? It's a thing in the universe that we know about and that works. And I think the fact that this religious stuff and this salvation and all this shit isn't like that, I almost feel like Christianity wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't amorphous and like hard to know what it is, because then it allows you to kind of take liberties and interpret it in different ways and run with it in different ways and find different ways of twisting and convincing yourself and explaining it away, and because it's not like a concrete thing. It's just a freaking, you know. And so I almost feel like Christianity wouldn't have been successful if it was concrete enough to measure, because then people would just, or it would have been infinitely successful, in which case, why didn't God or the Holy Spirit or whoever the hell, or Jesus, make it that way, right? It's like, was Jesus not smart enough to just do a better job of being clear and like proving himself, right? It's like, because like so much Jesus is like, I'm doing and saying these things so that you believe and that you can see, and like all this, he's saying all this stuff. But it's like, dude, okay, so if you're willing to make an effort, if you're willing to do acts, do miracles, say things with the intention of giving someone something to hold on to and believe, why would you go to the degree you went and not further, right? It's like you just go to this little degree where there's no cameras and there's no freaking, you don't say anything about science or freaking biology or anything that you could have known that wouldn't have been able to be known back then. You just do some magic tricks with like fish and like healing people. And that's it. It just seems like low effort, right? If you're acknowledging that you're doing stuff to get people to believe, the idea that you couldn't, and you want people to be saved, the idea that you couldn't have just did it better. That's another thing that just, I'm like, dude, why not? Like, it's one thing if you're like, no, I'm going to leave it, I'm going to stay out of it and let people have to figure out their own faith because free will, that's one thing. But if you're gonna intervene to try to give people something to hang on to faith-wise, it's just a F, in my opinion. It's just not good. It's just like, it's not, I don't know, it's just ass, right? It's like, at least make the resurrection accounts, like, it's okay if there's some things that are in one and not in another one, right? But don't make them contradictory. It's like, don't let, what is the Holy Spirit doing? Letting Mark record the rooster crows, undeniably different and wrong than Matthew and Luke, right? What's going on there, right? Like, it just is like, bro, if you're gonna go into people and have them kind of, inspire the documents, like, freaking get it right, like, at least, but so it's just a L, and it's weird because I really, in a lot of ways, I'm uncomfortable floating around in this world without having a belief system or really being, I don't know what the hell's going on. And I would love to not go to hell if that shit's real. And I think that's partially why it's so frustrating, because it's like, bro, come on. Like I said, I don't have a dog in the fight. Like when I started reading the Bible, and I'm going to finish it, it's like the jury's not out, but it's like, I genuinely did, a part of me, like, I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have a dog in the fight, but a part of me like wants to believe some shit, like, right, where I'm like, it would be nice to have a belief structure. And going back to the thing about faith, it's like, another thing that insulates faith and belief is the benefits you would get from it. So, and that's the emotional part of it, where it's like, I would say, it's good for human life, it's good for society, it's good for our world and just mental health and health in general, to have a solid belief structure, right? So like, I've always been jealous of people with that, and I would like to have that. And so part of me was hoping like, okay, maybe if I freaking read this shit with an open mind and just let it just be honest about what I think and what, whatever about it, I could get some of that. But big L, like honestly. So far, who knows? But I don't know. It just, oh god, dude, I was freaking raging this morning because I'm just like, bro, what the f, dude? It's so confusing. It's just like, and I just also feel like I was saying before, I feel just like weirdly alone that like I just I don't know if I've ever talked to someone or like had a conversation with someone that like feels the same way about it. Right? It's either like I know some people just think it's dumb and don't believe it and think it's dumb, right? And will argue it. Other people believe it and think it's right. Some people admit to be confused by it and still believe it. But it's like I'm in this weird space where it's like I don't know what it is. It's like I don't almost like I want to believe it, but it like won't let me, it won't give me a reason to believe it. And I just think it's like the emperor has no clothes, right? And so I'm looking around and I'm like, is this, are we like living our whole life like thinking that this is not sketchy, like, or like weird? And I don't know. It's just weird. It's just weird freaking situation. And you know, at the end of the day, I think even once I get to the end of the Bible, there's a lot of good shit in there. I don't want to pretend like it's just a nothing burger and it's you know, I feel like the idea of Jesus and Jesus as a person is super interesting. I feel like he was real, right? A real person. And he's obviously doing some interesting things that you can learn a lot from. I think he had good ideas. I think this whole thing that came from it, although it had some rough patches, admittedly, is good. It's not like I'm just like, F this is horrible. But it's just like, I just can't unsee that it's not what I was told, right? It's like not, and it's not what I would say the majority of your average white bread Christian churchgoer thinks, right? They're not like, because like I said, I've had many conversations with religious people in the past where I just shatter their faith. And I've had people text me and be like, bro, like after we had that conversation, I literally wasn't a Christian again. Like, I don't ever believe it again. Because I would be like, well, how does this make sense? Like, if God did this, then why that? And I just ask them questions about it, and they just go, oh, I never thought about that. And then it's like, well, dude, right? And so I think a lot of people are in that boat that just like don't contemplate it deeply, you know. And I find it interesting too that I've made it this long without really being like, what does faith even mean? Like, what is faith at the level of the brain? And can you choose to have faith? Is that even a coherent concept? Which it really isn't, you know, to a certain degree. Um, like you could act as if you had faith if you don't have a belief, but it's, and the fact that it's so hard to understand even in the first place what that means is also just problematic. But um, so it's also frustrating where it's like I think kind of gets to the core of it is like Jesus is saying, if you want eternal life, if you want to not go to hell, you have to do this thing. The problem is that that thing is not something you can choose. It's only something that can happen to you, right? And I feel like that's scientifically verifiable. You can make choices and put yourself in positions that make it more likely for that to happen to you, granted. But it's sold as if it's this thing that you can just do, right? You can just, I have faith now. And it's not. It literally isn't a thing that you can do. You know, I think if it was, I probably would. If I could just lie to myself and if there was a way for me to just like pretend like I believed it and like it made any sense and I could be like have a Christian faith and like live that way, I think that would be freaking awesome. I'm not convinced that I wouldn't do that if that was a possibility, but it just isn't. Like I can't. It's like the tiger in the room. It's like you're asking me to just like pretend like there's a tiger, and like I could pretend like there is a tiger, but I'm not gonna. It's not gonna be a deep transformative like thing, which is seems like what you need for salvation. And so it just seems kind of it's like BS, you know. I just feel like there's some BS happening there. I don't know. I mean, I'm curious how my thoughts will evolve about it over time and as I read the rest of the Bible, which I think I'll become increasingly more frustrated because I think as the apostles went out and like all these letters got written and all this stuff that happens in the continuation of the New Testament, I think more liberties get taken. I think more things get twisted. I think like more ideas get taken out of context and like get weird. Um, it seems like that's probably what happens. So yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff in John, man. I just read John and I'm like, man, there's all these weird concepts that are just like hard to wrap your head around and like don't seem like they really jive with the rest of the synoptic gospels, you know, and it's like weird. And I'm just like, dude, I don't know. I feel like honestly, I kind of feel like a dingbat a little bit for I don't know what I expected or why I expected what I expected, but it's kind of rough. I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna keep watching the gospel series with Jordan Peterson and like see what goes on there. But even then, I'm just a lot of the shit they say. I'm just like, hmm, hmm. Um, it's a little weird, and they don't even agree on a lot of stuff, right? There's disagreement among them, um, as well. So, huh. Last thing I'll say is that there's kind of this vibe you get from Jesus that the end of days and like the end times whatever is like gonna come while those people are alive, like it's literally there. um and his ministry and what he was doing was like a, you know, like a last minute kind of thing, right? And he's expecting the kingdom to come and all this. And part of me thinks that the way Christianity has evolved since then is a like necessitated or how would I say this? A result of the fact that that didn't happen. So for the belief structure and the ideas to survive, they kind of had to undergo these weird metamorphosis and like take on these weird structures and ideas that could last longer than maybe that Jesus's teachings were intended to like be robust. Like those teachings worked well for that time, but it's like, okay, well, we gotta freaking put up some scaffolding if we're gonna take this into the 20th century and that kind of thing. So, um, I think I get that vibe too. Um, I don't know. Kind of feel a little bad because I wanted to do a regular update, but I was like, there's no way I could do that. But if you want to see my update, and the other stuff I'm watching, what I'm listening to, what I'm reading, what I'm searching. I got some interesting stuff on there about crypto. All my threads, like if I put the thread in the what I'm reading section, like the big thread I went on this morning, if you want to go through it, you can. It's a freaking sender. And then there's a bunch of other threads about Jesus and salvation and stuff on the what I'm wondering about section. Just click the link in the description and you can go to my post. It's free to subscribe and you get my updates in your inbox each week. I'm also working on a giant Old Testament video, like my thoughts on the Old Testament. And it's like, I've been working on this big blog post and like this outline, and it's going to be a freaking ripper. And I feel a lot of affinity for the Old Testament because I think at the end of the day, it's, to me, I don't know. It's just like the Gospels. It's like the Gospels. It's like, these are the freaking, the thing. And I just read it and I just go, you know, just not necessarily about the ideas per se, but just the delivery, the inconsistencies, the, I don't know, it seems contrived in a lot of ways. It just seems like, you know, when I'm looking at these inconsistencies and I'm like, what's the scholarly consensus on this? And it's like, well, there were different emphasis and different intentions in writing it and different stylization and these things. And I'm like, taking liberties is what you're meaning, you know, but I don't know. I don't know, dog. Pretty weird. Ugh. Wow. That was a rant. That felt good though to do that. Um, I have a feeling I'm gonna probably eat my words in a lot of ways, or like I don't think a lot of these concepts are like unable to be understood. I feel like maybe the more I learn and think about these things and debate people with them, the more I'll like kind of get a grasp of some of these ideas, and get some answers maybe. Hopefully. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I was hoping for, but feel let down, kind of. I just wish I had like a buddy that felt like me. That just because I feel like the level of my like level of curiosity, because I feel like someone as skeptical as me generally isn't going to engage in the text to the degree that I am. Um, I feel like most people, because I almost quit a couple times in the Old Testament, right, where I'm like, this is dumb. Like I gotta dip, but I just decided to stick with it, on principle. And so I just feel like I'm in this weird boat that's like not common. I feel like most, someone in my position would just not be taking the time or just be shitting on the Bible way harder than I am, or writing it off. So I just feel like I come to it in this weird way that I'm like, don't feel like I know. I don't know what it is. I just don't feel like I relate to anyone. Weirdly, I just feel like I'm out here on this freaking island of confusion and like, I don't know, partly because I just live by myself most of the time, but um, I don't know. Okay, we're at 36 minutes. That's a long one. Thanks for watching if you watched. Sorry about that. Um, but I don't know. It is what it is. Click the link in the description if you want to check out the rest of my update and see what's going on in my life. And we'll see you next week. Peace.